come in today to talk about the teen years.
Because good old teen years.
The teen years. We don't talk about this enough, and I was saying to you during the break that I haven't done the teen years yet with my son. I know they are coming, and I already see signs of it, and I can feel it ramping up the anxiety.
Right.
And I think anytime you're doing the teen years, it's difficult for parents. But add into that all the technology and all the social things that are different from when we were kids that we have no reference point, and then put autism or Asperger's on top of that, and I go, help, help, we need some help. So what can you tell us to quiet our fears?
Well, and again, a lot of the things have changed in technology, like you said. There's texting, there's social media, there's, you know, such as Facebook or Twitter and all of those things, and then you have cell phones, and, you know, there's, you know, but when it comes down to it, it comes down to social skills. Right?
Okay.
Social skills are things that we've had to learn, that we've learned in the past, and same for our kids now. It's just learning it a different way.
Okay.
Okay, where before we wrote letters, now we have emails. Before we called people on the phone, now we text.
Yeah.
Social media obviously was something that wasn't available, but there was video, you know, videos and those types of things. So a lot of the stuff we have to work with our kids is just as we have to keep them caught up with technology, how to use it appropriately, how to use it, you know, to facilitate social relationships, how to
So do we have to learn that first?
Absolutely.
There we go.
One of the things is we're going to have to pull the parents in with us. Absolutely.
Oh, no. I was listening to NPR on the way in this morning, and they were talking about that a recent study was done, and where in my teen years, we were on the phone.
Right.
And I remember my father saying, you're going to run the phone bill up so much that we're going to have to sell the house. He was trying to, you know, my mother said that it grew out of my ear, and I thought nothing of being on the phone with somebody for 3 hours, and they were saying kids anymore do not make phone calls, but they'll send approximately 60 texts a day then.
I know I have a teenage daughter, and she texts way more than she talks on the phone.
This is...
I look at her bill, and her, you know, phone calls are this much, or texting is that much.
I don't get I mean, I text occasionally. I know how to do it. I learned in the last year, but I don't really get what's so reinforcing about it.
I don't know.
I mean, and I guess that's not the important question,
I think
but just knowing that it is.
It's short. It answers questions back and forth very quickly, which I think this is actually very useful for our kids because they can do a very quick ask question, get a result, or a question's asked for them, they can quickly respond back. There's not a lot of social cueing or social nuances or looking at facial features and things that we do very naturally that are very difficult for our kids. So it actually eliminates some of that social process for them.
That's good news.
So texting can be a very functional, very appropriate way for them to communicate with their other peers, with family members, and it's also a very safe way for them to communicate where they don't have to work on their a lot of their vocal or verbal language skills, using conversational skills, those types of things. They can really, focus in on answering the question or asking a question in a very quick and, effective way.
Okay. Where are you, since you have a teenage daughter, where are you in terms of, do we want to be looking at the texts, or is that an invasion of their privacy? What do you think?
I think for all kids, we should have some access to what they're saying and where who they're saying it to. I mean, some of this obviously is related to working with our kids. We want to make sure they're doing it appropriately, that they are picking up on some. There is social cues that come up with it, how they phrase things, how the question might have been asked to them, making sure that everything's socially appropriate. It's not going to be misread by the reader.
Right, because it's so easy to misread even emails.
Absolutely, and plus we want to make sure that this is fostering a relationship, not hindering a relationship or not destroying a relationship. But then as a parent, we also want to make sure that we're looking at the text and things like that to make sure that our kids aren't being manipulated. They're not being deceived into a bad decision or into some bad situations. And we see more and more of this as we're dealing with the teens. As they get into teen years, you see more and more of this where it's shocking on some of the stuff that happens. I mean, I know some of my patients here that I work with were coming across things that in my 19 years I've never had to work on. But
I'm hearing these stories about these texts and parents looking at the text and going, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea."
Right. No, it's true. I mean, obviously, just like you had mentioned earlier, it's teen years, so those are difficult to begin with. But we're getting into hormones and girls and boys and what's appropriate to say, what's not appropriate to say, when to say it, when not to say it, how do you respond when someone's, flirting with you, those types of things. Our kids don't know these things. This is not something that they've experienced. So a lot of our teaching has to be teaching them that it's okay. And how to do it in a way where it's appropriate, but yet you're not crossing any personal boundaries or any lines.
So as a parent, though, because we got to have like a set of steps and rules and things but how do we come up with those? Because some of the things, like for knowing what's appropriate with a text, I know with an email that if you put it all in caps that it's yelling. Is it the same thing for texting?
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to convey things like that.
Right.
How do we pick our rules, and how do we find these rules out? Do we talk to other parents? What do you suggest?
I think some of it is just is getting used, like you were saying, getting used to the technology a little bit.
So we have to use it ourselves with our friends.
Right. And plus, I think the way you communicate back and forth with your friends or spouse or relatives, you're able to see what works and what doesn't work. How do you say certain things? I mean, when it comes to the acronyms and what are these symbols mean and that symbols mean, I mean, again, they don't have to know those. It's a whole other jargon world.
It's a whole we have enough with autism jargon. We have to learn that too. I have to learn the BFF and all the other things that come after that.
LOL and all those good things. So we do need to keep up a little bit with that jargon because that's what's going to make them fit in.
Okay.
Is the appropriate use of those types of things. If they're typing everything out, while their communicative intent will be heard and will go appropriately, it won't be as socially recognized or socially appropriate to what the kids are texting now. Okay. And again, that's just using the acronyms and the icons and all of those stuff. When do you put a smiley face? When don't you? When is LOL appropriate? When is it all caps? Those types of, social rules that go into texting and emailing nowadays.
Okay, so if we have teenagers, we need to start texting so that we can see what it's like.
You need to brush up a little bit.
And if we have younger kids that we know are headed towards the teen years, we got to keep up on it.
The funny thing is, you can actually Google texting rules and appropriateness. What is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And there'll be plenty of websites that actually show you what these things mean. What does LOL mean? What does BRB mean? And those,
what does BRB?
Be right back.
Oh.
Those types of things. When to use a smiley face, when to use a happy face, and all of those different things, just to have a base definition, a base understanding of what our kids will need to use. Okay. Now again, it's different from 13 to 18 on what they use and what they don't use or how they're using it, but it gives you a very good idea of at least the basics so that we can start teaching them younger instead of waiting until it's a problem when it's older.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the social media stuff like Facebook.
Right.
Because we've been talking a lot about bullying, and we're going to be talking a lot more about bullying.
Good.
And, Facebook, my son and I watched a program on Nickelodeon this weekend that was about bullying, and the kids were talking about how they weren't being bullied in the classroom, they were being bullied on Facebook.
Right.
This is a whole other scary thing to me, and we see in the news that it has some terrifying consequences as a result of bullying on Facebook. So what do we need to know as parents, and what do we need to be saying to our kids that are teenagers about how they are on Facebook so they're not bullying and they're not being victims of bullying?
Right. And I think what you had mentioned earlier about the texting, I think applies here too. You want to make sure you have access to their Facebook account so that we're able to see what messages are coming in, what coming out, who they're making friends with, and so forth. The things with Facebook is it's so broad and so wide open. You can friend anybody. It doesn't matter if they live in a different country, different state, different city. You can friend anybody you want, and 9 out of 10 times they'll accept a friendship. We need to teach our kids, what a friend is, and we've done this over the years, right? We've done this since they're very, very young, right? Circle of friends and so forth. And we work our way up. So we have to, this is where we're using that again. We're using that knowledge that we've taught these kids about, okay, who's a real friend? Who do you want to friend on Facebook? So that the friend population that they have is people that your child will know. Your child has, either gone to school with, played sports with, gone to church with, what have you. So then that their friend group is, for the most part, familiar. Okay. Then we need to teach the kids how to you don't have to accept a friend request. Yeah. And that takes a lot because a lot of our kids, they're just wide open. They want to be everybody's
I know
friend.
adults that don't appreciate that they
Right.
think I don't want to be on Facebook because then all these people will friend me and I don't want to be friends with them.
Or I don't want to hurt their feelings.
Right, and there are people perhaps in my family, not that live in my house, but perhaps other people in my family.
We're not saying no names.
We're not saying allegedly, allegedly people in my family who might live in the middle of the country who get horribly offended if somebody doesn't subscribe or somebody defriends or that it's the worst possible thing, and so even people who are not on the spectrum are trying to sort this stuff out.
It's true, and that's just normal. I mean, that's just a normal response, right? We don't want to hurt other people's feelings.
Right.
And I think that's genuine, and I'm glad when our kids feel that way because that means they actually are thinking of what the other person's feeling. Perspective taking. Something that historically is difficult for children or young adults with autism. So when I start to see that, I'm actually very encouraged because they are actually reaching out. They're thinking about what the other person will feel. So
and we could actually use it as a tool to help, if you do this, how do you think the other person might react?
Exactly.
Okay,
and this is where we can use Facebook as a teaching tool.
Great.
Because it teaches them how their social skills, perspective taking, the social cognitions that they've learned, how we can apply it now.
Okay.
Do they really know you? Does this person really care about you?
Right.
Is this person really going to care if you defriend or friend them? How do you feel about it?
Right.
Do you want this to be this person's friend, or does it really not matter if you're their friend? And we can use these social media outlets as ways of looking at their social skills, a way of developing further social skills. And I think working on assertiveness and attentiveness to these types of things is great because it's a modern day technology. It's modern day teenage angst, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah.
But yet, for us, it's also a learning tool on how to further increase their social skills, further increase their social aptitude.
Okay. So we got to make friends with it, though. That's step number one. We have to, because otherwise we're not going to be able to monitor what's happening.
Exactly.
And it is important for us to monitor it.
And like you said, it's important to monitor because there's a lot of stuff out there that's not good. There's a lot of there's bullying. There's definitely cyberbullying, and but that's not as common as much as just bad, just someone saying a bad comment, someone being disrespectful, someone being saying something that maybe is misinterpreted. And what's our response? How do our kids respond to that? Do they take offense to that? Do they read into it wrong? How do we respond back to that?
Right.
Where's the line where they're no longer a friend?
Right.
When do they cross that line? And then obviously we prevent it from ever getting to a bullying stage by teaching them that it's okay to say no.
Yep.
It's okay to not respond.
Right.
The best response sometimes is a non-response. It's okay to, if this is making you anxious, if this is making you unhappy, it is okay to defriend them and, to no longer have access to their jargon or to their comments or to their disrespect. And that's okay. Let's move on. Let's fill our lives with people that are happy, people that we like.
And obviously, not only do we want to be monitoring it, but we also want to be teaching our kids to communicate with us or someone else if something's happening that's not pleasant, because at some point we may not be able to monitor. Right,
exactly. And you want to make sure that there's open communication so that your child will communicate with you. Hey, Johnny's being, he said that I was a blank, 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 or he said he's going to come to my work and kick my butt.
Right.
Then the parent can be alerted, look into it, see if this is something of someone just talking out of emotion, maybe talking to somebody else, but yet our child read it, or is it something that's an actual threat to where parents would have to get involved and make sure that something like that doesn't happen.
Okay.